Kia ora and welcome to the Creative Matters podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with New Zealand artists. I'm your host, Mandy Yarkich. These conversations are intimate, uplifting and insightful. The guests on this show have absolutely enriched my life, and I'm sure their stories will have the same effect on you. Thank you so much for joining me to listen to these amazing people speak about what drives them, the way they work, and their personal takes on life. Hi, and welcome back to Creative Matters. This week I'm speaking to Virginia Woods-Jack. Virginia is a British-born photographic artist and curator, currently living and working in Aotearoa, New Zealand. She is also the founder and curator of Women in Photography New Zealand and Australia. Virginia's art practice explores notions of connection to place, materiality, and memory to consider relationships between the human and more than human worlds. By doing so, she aims to understand how memory informs the way people interact with the natural environment, to highlight the importance of care in navigating the climate crisis. I'm Zoom calling down to Pornicki, Wellington. Virginia is in her shared studio space, and you can hear sounds of another artist making in the background. And Virginia's sound is a little bit echoey, but her story is absolutely well worth listening to. I found the ideas behind her art practice totally fascinating, and I'm sure you will too. Hello, Virginia.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Lovely to see you in your very busy, amazing-looking studio.
Thank you.
So lovely to have you here. Thank you very much for joining me, and welcome to Creative Matters.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. I was just saying, as a photographic artist, you have such an interesting practice, and your work is really the kind of work that having a supporting discussion around it just gives you so much more insight to the work. And I've really enjoyed learning more about your practice and your ideas. So can you take us right back to the beginning, please, Virginia, all the way back to your childhood?
Well, I'm originally from the UK. My father is American. My mother is English, but her whole family lived in Canada. Grew up in a very small village in the north of England, 4 brothers and sisters. We grew up, my parents owned a children's bookshop, and we lived right above it. And I grew up surrounded by fields and rivers and all of these things, which I now see feed into my practice. And my grandfather was an amazing writer, painter, photographer, all just for love and passion, not for sort of, financial gain. And it was him actually who introduced me to photography when I was about 11 years old. And I worked in my parents' shop and for a summer to raise enough money to buy my first camera. And from that point on, I just always seemed to have a camera with me. But it wasn't, I went to boarding school. I was the sort of boarding department photographer, but it was all just me documenting what was happening around me. And there wasn't any real intention behind it. But now I look back, I was starting to build my sort of, I suppose, visual lexicon or my own way of how I saw things. And I traveled and then finally settled on art school when I was probably about 22. And the first day I was doing a foundation course in Liverpool, and I went into a dark room, and just the magic of, 1, developing my own film, and then 2, being in a dark room, I just didn't look back from that point, really. So from my foundation, I went to do a degree in photography, which I loved. I've studied at the University for Creative. Well, that's what it's called now. It's called the University of Creative Arts. It was called Kent Institute of Art and Design when I was there, and just spent 3 years with my sort of head in books and in the dark room. And it was just outside London, so I was constantly going to exhibitions and just having that opportunity to completely immerse myself in photography was quite incredible.
Yeah.
And then I moved to London, and I kind of had the sense that I had an idea of my craft, but I hadn't got a clue how it related into any kind of a career at all. And part of our degree, we'd had to do some assisting and working alongside other artists, and which I enjoyed, but I knew I didn't want to assist a commercial photographer or a fashion photographer, or I didn't want to do anything like that. I wanted to learn about the industry from the other side. So I went and worked for a gallery, a photography gallery in London, which was great. A really small sort of owner, operator, I suppose. Yeah, the guy who owned it was an Italian gentleman who had an amazing photography collection, decided to open up a little gallery off Charing Cross Road above a bookshop, so there was all of this sort of, back to being above a bookshop.
How amazing.
It was really amazing. And I got to work with some amazing artists and also see how artists approach a gallery and how galleries work with artists.
Which is actually a really great thing for an artist, as a young artist. It's a great thing to do and to be able to see and experience.
Yes, and how you present yourself to a gallery, how galleries work with you, how as a gallerist you need to be able to write about other people's work, but also as an artist, how you need to be able to write about your own work. And they also sent me off to art fairs, which was amazing. So I got a insight into those relationships with collectors and selling, and then I had the opportunity to go and work with a new collective of artists that was starting, which was called Grow Bag. Funny name now when I think about it, but it was started by two brothers, Greg and Ollie Williams. And Ollie was half of the artist duo, Ollie and Susie. So they were painters. Ollie and Susie are painters. Greg Williams is a photographer. Sort of pollination of art forms, and they've all gone on to have amazing careers.
I mean, again, that's such a fantastic thing as a young artist to be exposed to.
Yes.
Having a group of, a network of artists who are in a similar position, starting their careers. Is amazing.
Yeah. And sort of seeing all the different ways that people worked and the risks that people were prepared to take. And again, I got to go to all of the festivals, which was fantastic. And I got to work with, because they all had quite a documentary style to their work. So I was working, I got to introduce their work to picture editors. And at Perpignan, which is a big photojournalism, documentary photography festival in the south of France, I'd be there with the photographers talking to picture editors. So I got to meet, the picture editor of the New York Times magazine and the Sunday Times magazine. And so I built these relationships with people. They had the sense of who I was, and, they were all already sort of introduced to my practice, and they were. So, in the UK, I was doing more sort of long form editorial work, portrait based. And I really enjoyed it. It was great, but I always had my sort of art practice going side, and I was one of my examiners for my undergraduate was one of the lecturers from the Royal College of Art, and he was very much encouraging me to apply to go to the RCA. And then my then husband was offered a job over here. So it was sort of, we were pregnant with our first child. And so it was sort of like, I'd done lots of traveling, and I'd never moved to the other side of the world, never had a baby before. And I didn't really know what I was letting myself in for. So sort of, we just arrived on an airplane with a 12-week-old baby, knowing no one.
Wow. That's a big move. And it's, in a way, it's a shame because you've made all those amazing connections in the UK. I mean, how are you feeling as far as your career went at that point?
I mean, it was 19 years ago now that I came here. And when I sort of think back, I mean, the internet was really, I mean, I remember seeing 2 photographs of Poniki, before I moved here, sort of thinking, oh, that kind of reminds me of San Francisco. That looks really cool. Yeah, and there was, I knew some people who had traveled here, but that was it. I had no idea what the art world was like, and I don't think I'd factored in what impact having a baby would have on, meeting people. And then just my availability to be able to, to work and get into the art world. And also that I just wasn't known here at all. And I didn't know anybody here. And I didn't know where all the artists were.
Yeah.
So that was a real baptism of fire, I have to say. But Aotearoa has been an amazing studio from which to create work in, and it's enhanced my practice hugely, alongside the development of the internet. And I've still got all my contacts in the UK. I was very careful to continue to cultivate those and grow those exponentially, particularly since COVID.
And so how long did it take you to kind of make your contacts and return to your art practice?
Well, I think the thing is that my practice has always existed, regardless of whether anything's happening. It's just integral. It's how I make sense of things. So it's a good way of getting to meet people. Obviously, I then had another child sort of, within 2 years of having moved here, and my ex-husband worked in the film industry, which is like hugely demanding. So one of us had to be present, and that one was, that person was me. But I was always creating work alongside. I had a editorial agent in New York for a while, so I was still producing content for people over here. But I went in 2009, I went back to university and did my master's in fine art, which was incredible in that initially I remember thinking, I wish there was a master's in photography, but it was actually the best thing for the development of my practice that it was a master's in fine art, because I was then having my work critiqued by sound artists, by painters, by sculptors, by textiles, this whole other way of my work being viewed, which really helped me to see my work differently for different points of reference. Because up until that point, my community was photographers. So it was brilliant to expand out of that.
And did you find that being part of that fine arts study that you became a little bit more conceptual with your photography, or were you already?
Definitely. I think I already was anyway, but it helped me to make sense of what I was doing with my work and where it sat. No, sort of, life happens. You suddenly find yourself as a single parent, and you I've always just been very versatile. I don't know whether growing up in a large family and seeing my parents running their own business and how you have to kind of go, oh, okay, things are on a bit uneven ground at the moment. I need to do this. So one of my collectors asked me to do a planting plan for them for their garden. So I did that, and I was doing, working in people's gardens for a while as an extra, because you got to pay the rent. And then through that, an English artist who was based here for a long time, a gentleman called Max Pate, who's a very successful artist. He bought some of my work. I went to Max's practice as well, which was incredible because he was so, all of those kinds of things. But also with his collectors, and it kind of reminded me, like at Growbag, it was all about us doing it for ourselves. It was artists doing it for the sake of the art and for ourselves. And Max was very similar in that way, in that everything we sold to his collector base was all people that he'd cultivated himself. So at that point, he wasn't even working with a gallery. He's now got gallery representation around the world. But we were doing everything. So I was having all of these conversations with these collectors and I've been very fortunate that a number of them are now, my collectors as well. So sort of continuing with that theme of doing things for yourself. So prior to working for Max, I did some teaching at Massey, at the School of Fine Art. And I think one thing that I've always been aware of is that we have to make our own opportunities. That the art world is both very giving, but it can also have a lot of closed doors as well. And that we can feel like if our work isn't hanging on the walls of the gallery, then is it valid? Does it hold value? What's its importance? But my drive to make work has always been extremely strong. So I've always thought, right, okay, well, I want to do this. How am I going to actually do that? How can I make that work? So back in 2000, before I started working for Max, I was in conversation with a painter in Australia, who's a dear friend of mine, Tanya Harricks, whose work is quite beautiful. And we'd been talking about doing an artist residency together, and we'd applied to Bundanon a couple of times and hadn't been successful, but we really loved our idea. So we decided that we'd do a self-funded residency, self-directed residency on Gurry, Fraser Island. And we went on to Kickstarter, and we basically sold in this whole idea. And we got really good support. So and what we were offering was work before we'd even made it. So the opportunity for people to buy work. And I don't think either of us had thought it was going to be as successful as it was.
That's incredible. That's like a public funding platform, Kickstarter.
Yes. I suppose it's a little bit like boosted, but it's for anything, everything really. And so
how did we make that happen, Virginia? Sorry to interrupt.
How do we make that happen?
Yeah, because it's such a good platform for artists and for people taking on new projects. And it's amazing that it was so successful. How did you actually make that work?
You have to make we made a quite good video. I mean, she was in Australia, and I, at that point, was actually caretaking some land on the top of Tarkika Hill with my partner and children. So I had to keep on going down the hill to make recordings because there's just no reception up there at all. And we sent it out to everybody that we knew, and everybody we knew sent it out to everybody they know. And next thing we knew, it was fully funded. The whole thing was fully funded.
Wow.
Which was which was incredible. And we were off to Guri for 12 days. And we were just staying. We contacted the University of the Sunshine Coast, and we stayed in their research facility. And we just were out from dawn till dusk every single day, just creating work. And it was quite hilarious because I remember sort of turning up to the airport because I'd done research, but a lot of the research that I was doing was like actually trying to get into, the history of Guri. It was really hard getting behind the tourist story. So I just decided that I was just going to have to respond to whatever I found when I got there, but then I needed to have like all of my different means of producing work, which meant taking a number of cameras. I've got a very odd collection of analog cameras, and I didn't want to get there and be sort of like, oh, that camera is the way I want to respond to this place. So I took all of them, but I wasn't going to put them in the hold. So I remember turning up to the airport, pretending like my backpack only weighed like 5 kgs when it was proper stuff. So,
and what was the project? What was that project that you were working on?
None of this was done. None of this was done with us in mind. That was that project,
yeah, right?
Which ended up being a felt response to the experience, and that body of work was quite instrumental in allowing work time. So I created like all of the source material whilst I was there, but I didn't know what any of it meant at that point. So nothing happens quickly in my practice, even though, photography inherently happens within a millisecond or maybe a couple of seconds, or in the case of some projects, I do 24-hour exposures. But usually the opening and closing of the shutter is, it's a millisecond. But from that point on, then there becomes this whole dialogue between myself and the work over what's the work saying to me? How do I help the work to communicate properly with the audience beyond myself? So it becomes sort of like me deciphering the work and then being able to decipher it for an audience as well.
Yeah, oh, that's interesting. And so the that, did you say Gari it's called? Not
Guri. K-Gari, but you pronounce it Guri, which is Fraser Island.
Okay, yeah. Fraser Island, yeah. And that is off the east coast of Australia, 122 k's in the world.
Yeah, and it's World Heritage. Yeah, it's got World Heritage status for its ecological properties. So whilst I was there, it was very interesting. So it's entered into that backpackers must-do list when you visit Australia, like going to Bondi Beach or Uluru, or there's now Fraser Island is on there. So, but it was interesting in doing the research around the reasons why it has World Heritage status for its ecological qualities. Everything that is jeopardizing that is us. Like every single factor that is jeopardizing all of that is us. The amount of visitors, and it was really interesting being able to track. I'm a real data nerd. Being able to track how the visitor numbers increasing, what impact that was actually having on the environment. And so whilst I was there, most people will just go for 2 or 3 days. They do the whole tag-along tours where they're all in four-wheel drives together. And it was sort of watching these groups of young travellers, and I wasn't wanting to critique what they were doing, because I was just responding to what I was actually seeing, and everybody taking selfies and then on to the next place selfie. Whereas Tanya and I, particularly with her being a painter, we would arrive in a space and we would stay there for, if not the whole day, then half the day, and she'd be doing lots of sketches. And So my whole way of working completely slowed down. And so I came back with all of this material, and then it was kind of like, what am I going to,
What is this
what am I
going to
going to do
become?
with it? What's this going to become? What lens
This
am
is
I going to
interesting.
view this through?
And so you're not actually planning on a particular project. I mean, you must have. I guess you're recording the ecology and the nature of the island. But can you describe, actually, for people who haven't seen your photography, what? Well, it's very hard to describe, really, isn't it?
No, I always hate it when people say, "What kind of photography do you do?" And I'm
Well,
like,
it's quite varied, isn't it? I mean, I'm just looking at 6 photos from Fraser Island, and some of them are very abstract, and some are of the landscape, but they have another quality. They're quite contemporary, but they're also, well, yeah. How would you describe them?
Well, I'd say that whole project is a bit like a sort of waking dream, is the way that I've come. It's definitely sort of like a felt response, both in the making of it, but then in how I responded to everything that I was learning after I'd actually been there. So in being there and seeing how people moved around it, seeing how there were these sacred spaces, but they weren't signposted as sacred spaces. So people weren't tailoring the way that they interacted within their behaviors within these spaces. Like no native First Nations person would behave. There were certain bodies of water that only women would go into, or only men would go into, and there'd be rites of passage. And so these were all things that I was learning after the fact. And then looking back at the work, and I'd been working with the peel apart Polaroids, and then seeing how the environment interacted with those, thinking about cultural history, personal history, the degradation of a landscape. And so I didn't want the work to be didactic, because whilst I was there, I became very aware of the fact that I was one of those visitor numbers. And I was fortunate enough to do the photo book masterclass here in Aotearoa back in 2018, and there was an amazing group of artists that they brought from overseas, and I presented this work because I was trying to work out, like, how do I present this work. And it was really interesting seeing how the different artists responded to the work. So the way that I did it was that I printed out all of my the works that I really loved, put them on a wall, and then asked them, once I'd spoken about the work, to edit it. So in that process of having the different artists look at the work and edit the work for me, it was really interesting how some of them just pulled out all of what I would call like the hero landscape shots. And I was just like, the project's so not about that. It's an aspect of it, but it's not about that. And then other people would only go for the really abstract work. And I was like, it's not about that either. So it was finding that place where the work started to speak to me. And Yumi Goto, who is a curator from Tokyo, and she runs handmade photography book workshops in Tokyo. And she was amazing, because she said to me, the way that you work with analog, with the Polaroids and with film, you want the environment to be infused into it. You're really thinking about these tenets of your work, which are about memory and how we interact with our environment and materiality. And she said, and then when you produce something on your digital camera, you're suddenly like this bizarre purist. And she said, it's as if you won't touch them. And she said, yet there's so much material in your digital contact sheets which feed into the story that you're weaving, but you're choosing not to use them. What she said, why don't you want to interact and interfere with them in the same way that you do with the analog work? She said, because she said, I think of you in a way like a sculptor who's working with clay. Yeah, the medium is very malleable in your hands. So she really encouraged me to go back in and mine my archive. And that advice of mining my archive, that just opened up, and that feeds through like every single project that I work on now. And I think really it was from that juncture that I could see that there was this, my process, things keep on re-entering into the work. I don't, do something and then I'm done with it. I'm constantly, there's now images that feed from one project to another. I have a much more of an overarching approach to my practice, even though I have to have things as series, on my website, so that it makes some sense. It doesn't mean that aspects from a project won't end up feeding into another, or an actual image or an approach won't end up feeding into another work. I'm constantly reimagining how a really work can translate into a new body of work, because it's all about how I see things, or what I'm interested in, and those things aren't standalones, and they don't happen in isolation from one another.
And is it purely location that is sort of creating difference between?
I don't think it's even location anymore. Because say like Coming Home in the Dark, that series, that's got multiple locations embedded within singular images. So that work came out of lockdown. I wasn't the very first lockdown. I don't know how your listeners feel, particularly anybody who's creative, but that felt like suddenly all of these people, our interactions with social media and everything completely changed. And then suddenly all of these people were like, look at all of this work that I've made. And I was just like, I don't want to make work. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get through like homeschooling.
And tough on parents that time, I'd say.
Yeah, and also sort of thinking about the fact that because apart from my little family here, I have no family in this part of the world. My closest relative is my brother, who I'm very close to, but he's in Australia. And our borders being closed and all of the things which I totally was behind and understood and everything, but it didn't make my creative buzz. It didn't give me a creative buzz initially.
Yeah, it does seem to be sort of quite polarizing. It's either people became very motivated through lockdowns and some people really were not motivated.
But I was going to say, I also think that I've come to think of a creative output is it's not just about creative output, it's actually about creative input as well. And I'm constantly reading, thinking, researching, listening, looking. So even if I no longer, maybe it's just being a bit older, I put literally no pressure on myself with regards to creative output, because I'm constantly doing things in my sketchbook and writing and making notes and all of those things funnel through into actually then creative output.
Yeah, that is a big part of it. And it's a big part of your practice, isn't it? The writing and the
so Coming Home in the Dark was me sort of thinking about all of these different places that I've anchored myself throughout my life, locations, and it was totally unintentional. I wasn't thinking about making a series. I was just like, I've been a lucid dreamer my whole life. And I've had a recurring dream my whole life. And it was me trying to work out if I could actually create an image that in some way reflected to me, didn't make any difference to me whether it's, resonated with anyone else. If it resonated with me and looked like something how my dream felt, and it did. And I was just like, I've written, that's the one of the starry night, and there's a mountain and there's a horse in it. And I just sort of, popped it on Instagram, just sort of saying, hey, I've just been playing around. And, the response was really, really positive. And I was like, oh, it's quite interesting, that kind of tethering.
I mean, it's such a personal story for you, but people connecting to it.
Yeah. So then I started thinking about, and I was already at that point reading about the Maramataka and soul lunar data, and how soul lunar data, you can locate yourself to somewhere specific, and from there you can, a time and a date, and you can find out where you are in that specific location, where you were in relation to the moon and the stars. And so again, there's just all of these layers that end up feeding into my work. And it's all based on memory, our interactions with I call it I don't call it the more than human. I didn't coin that term. The more than human world, which is basically everything other than us.
Yeah. And that series you're still working on. It's a work in progress, and it's an exploration into perceptions and our connection to the natural world through the dreamlike states, as you said, but with that sort of connection to dusk and dawn. And so the images that I have here in front of me are all very dark, but really beautiful. Like they're dark, but they're not dark.
They're supposed to be, quite luminous, I suppose.
Yeah.
And have a sort of dreamlike qualities. And again, they pull in images from my family's archive, images that I've created, contemporarily. And it's a beautiful way of working. I mean, it's bringing all of these different times and locations and mediums into it. It does bring it into a digital space. But they're kind of images you can get lost in. Well, for me, I can get lost in them.
Yeah, and they're very much like that. I mean, they really draw you in. There's something really special and unique about them. So
they're very difficult to print.
Oh, is that right? And what makes them difficult to print? In what way?
Oh, just make this. I work with Sanji at SCAR up in Auckland, who's just amazing. And there's lots of conversation, because it's that translating it into something that's such a sort of felt response into it, like a physical material object. Just getting the depth of it right. And so he's having to take all of these sort of conceptual things that I'm talking about, and then creating a print that responds to that. And he does it brilliantly. Yeah.
So are you actually working at all in the dark room for these ones, or is it purely?
No, I mean, before I moved to New Zealand, I printed everything myself. I processed everything myself. I was in the dark room all the time. Color dark room. I was color printing, loved it, absolutely adored it, and had to. But came here, and it was just the dawn of digital, and everybody, New Zealand is so good at being like first adopters of things, but in that they kind of go, okay, let's just get rid of all of that stuff that we used to do before. So I was just like, are there no dark rooms here? And they're like, no, gosh.
Really?
That all got through. No color dark rooms. Whereas now there are. There's one in Auckland at the Black and White Box. They've got a color dark room. So I'm at least a good few thousand kilometers closer to a color dark room than I've been for many years. But I had to I could have sort of stamped my feet and So, but this isn't how I work, or I just adapt. And I actually love the challenge, because I had to actually learn how to take photographs again when I moved here, because the light was so different.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And
that fascination for the darkroom you spoke of earlier, which so many photographers have, that really sort of deep down connection and sort of rush of, enthusiasm and passion for darkrooms, which often go back to people's childhoods. I've heard quite a few people speaking about that. How did you actually kind of take yourself away from that, or do you miss that kind of work, or have you just kind of taken on a new way of working?
Well, I mean, working with analog, and I think because I use very few things in the way that they're supposed to be used. So I get my hands dirty in other ways, and I've always really valued the relationships that you have, either with somebody who owns a darkroom, or somebody who's printing your work, or we can't create anything completely in a vacuum, and everybody who I work alongside brings something to my practice. If they don't, then those relationships don't tend to last very long, because we can't do everything ourselves. We just can't. And I think becoming a parent made me realize that, probably really very strongly. But also working with all of the artists that I worked with in London, realizing how those conversations and that community just enhances your work. It doesn't detract from it. It just
absolutely, yeah, for sure. And so just looking at the coming home in the dark work, the amazing photograph with the girl with a jumper and a skirt on holding.
That's me.
That's you. So tell us how the actual process from beginning to end of how you made that photograph.
So that's an example of an image that just keeps on reappearing in my work, in different forms. So it's an image that one of my parents took of me, and they gave it to me when I moved to New Zealand. My mum made me a little album, and she wrote along. She inherited my grandfather's writing ability, so she wrote this little story alongside all of these photographs of me growing up. And there's something in that photograph. The original photograph, I'm stood in front of a big house, and there's all these cars behind me, but I'm completely focused on making a daisy chain. And it's something in that focus of making the daisy chain and just being completely absorbed in what I'm doing, that I always look at that photograph and I feel like it's the truest representation of how I remember myself as a child, and how I was in this big family, but I would be constantly taking myself off and going to the river or going into the woods, or and exploring more sort of one-on-one relationships with everything else that was going on around me. I've always felt a lot happier in one-on-one sort of situations than I do in a large crowd. And so, but I always tend to extract myself out of that image to place myself in other spaces within my work. And so the Starry Night, that was created from my garden, and it was just one of those clear nights, so dark moon night, so new moon, so when all of the stars are just they're just popping out there. And so I'd been creating images, and again I just sort of create images without really knowing why I'm doing it, just because I'm driven to make them. So that's what I mean, is that these all become, I suppose, like for a painter where you have all of your reference sketches. I have this collection of images, and they're all sort of just filed away, and it's sort of like I never know if they're going to be of any use or not. And then in this coming home in the dark, where I was sort of thinking about this sort of dream space and the locating of myself in different places, I'd started looking through all of my images of the night sky, and there was just this one with the bright star right in the middle. And again, I was thinking about dreams and how quite often when I appear in them, I'm completely different age to what I am now. And I just remembered that photograph of myself, and I just sort of thought, I'm just going to. I work quite intuitively, in that kind of visual sense with all of the research rattling around in my head. And so I just brought them together in a sort of digital space. And so where my fingers joined together in the original image of me creating this daisy chain, my fingers just came together perfectly around the starburst. But again, I always like to, my hope is that there's always enough room within my work for other people to enter with their own experience. This is what these works mean to me, but I'm always very open to them meaning something completely different to other people.
I mean, that is a very powerful photograph. It's just so contemplative, and I think you can very easily put yourself into the girl's, your shoes, And so process-wise, did you actually overlap photographs?
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. It's so beautiful. And then the colors, because they're sort of muted with the darkness, but they, as you said, they still have this sort of illumination as well. It's just a really beautiful combination.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous. And the one with the wave with the sort of falling
stars, crashing waves and falling stars. Yeah, that's I love that work. I do love that work. And that work was in the Female in Focus Global Awards, which was amazing. So it sort of toured to Florida and London, and was great. So it's run by the British Journal of Photography. It's called the BJP 1894, I think it's called now. And they run a lot of competitions. But a number of years ago, maybe 4 years ago, they started doing the Female in Focus, by highlighting the work of female and non-binary artists, all of whom are underrepresented within the photographic world, within the art world. Yeah, so that work was really pulling. Again, that one was actually made after a lockdown, but it was that, again, the two works were the two images that one work is created from were made at times which I didn't realise were going to be auspicious until hindsight. So the waves were created on the Heafy track down south, and it was on not New Year's Eve, but I think it was the 30th of December 2019. Before everything that happened in 2020 happened. And it was a king tide and the waves were huge. It was just, they were so just there was just an urgency. Well, there is on the west coast, isn't there, of the South Island. The way it's just, the power of them was just incredible. And then the second image was created on around Matariki, around the winter solstice in 2020, and it was a dark moon, and the skies, there's so many stars, and I was just watching all of these falling stars. We were walking our dogs at night, and I had my camera with me, and I was trying to capture them, but it was sort of like, it just looked like photographs of the night sky. I don't know, it wasn't really doing anything for me. So I decided I'd try and track them. And then seeing in these sort of longer exposures, these trails, that felt more how it actually felt to view them. But then suddenly, like, all of the stars were falling. And again, thinking about Sol Lunar data and important times, I sort of located myself with the Soul Lunar Data to the start of the Heathey Track on the West Coast on that day, and then the winter solstice. And so bringing together two locations, two times, two different relationships to the moon and the stars, and brought it into one image. And one of my lovely collectors has got a really big print of that, and it's sort of 1.5 meters by a meter, new museum glass, and you just fall into it.
You would.
So yeah,
that would be so beautiful. And being a West Coaster myself, even though that was in the South Island, you can really sort of connect with it, the power of the West Coast of New Zealand, which is pretty mighty. And I love the sort of blues and all the different colours that come in from that sort of night shot. It's actually amazing, like, all sorts. So those photos that we're talking about, the photographs are all on your blog post, so listeners can check those out. And then you have other incredible bodies of work, I guess, which obviously, as you said, they're all sort of works in progress and they kind of connect to other works over time. But can we talk about the Intertwined Stories collection?
Yes. So, I suppose the overarching, the last few years I've been really thinking about the natural world and water in particular as an archive for memory. And that can be, cultural memory, ecological memory, personal, communal. There's so much encapsulated within our waters. And again, the sort of stuff that I was philosophical, theoretical, ecological, hydrofeminist readings that I was consuming at the time, alongside walking on the beach every day, picking up ocean plastic, picking up the sort of bits, the microplastics, all of the things that you find on a beach when you're walking. But I started looking at all of these things that I was collecting in relationship to what I was reading, and realizing that every single item that I was collecting related to a purchase, a familial event on a beach, something that hadn't been disposed of properly, that had washed down from our rivers into the oceans, that they all relate back to something else, but I was finding them all in this one location. And so it's called Intertwined Stories because, I'm sure living in Muriwai, that when all of the seaweed washes up, it doesn't wash up on its own. It's got things scattered all the way through it. And so I was pulling out sort of fishing wire that would have, bits of seafloor or rimu attached to it, and again, just sort of thinking in quite sort of sculptural ways. I was then bringing those things back into my studio, and I was looking, at how I could create work with these. And initially, I was just sort of scanning them. Initially, I was just photographing them on my light box, and seeing what kind of relationships I could have between them, and then printing stuff out, just a rough print. And none of it was working. And I was sort of, every print I made, it was just on photocopy paper. I was sort of scrunching up and playing away. And then I was sort of like, I'm actually I was thinking about the cycle of rubbish, that nothing gets thrown away. And I was sort of like, that's interesting. I'm creating waste from waste. Again, thinking the cyclical nature of everything. So I then started infusing the original rubbish into the rubbish that I was making, and then I started scanning it. And I'd been reading about where they were finding, how deep in the trenches they were finding plastics, like just how invasive it is in our oceans. And so I really wanted this sinking internal sinking, floating feeling, because the stuff doesn't go away. It just changes shape and form and just becomes smaller and smaller. And yeah, so it's that thing. I'm just constantly pushing an idea until I find something that's like, okay, that's how it's supposed to.
And it takes you down another road kind of thing from there.
Yeah. And then then I just start pushing the idea and tweaking it. But those are all cameraless. Those are produced on a scanner. And again, it's everything is now a work in progress, because I think because I have this overarching approach in my practice. So things are constantly being added to, because these are all things that I'm doing in my everyday life. So I'm sure at some point I'll go, okay, I've made enough of those, but I've maybe apart from actually none of this was done with us in mind. Most of my projects, like on the website, they're maybe, like between 8 and 10 images. They're not masses of images, because they come to me at different times and they're added to. So
yeah, but you take a lot of images to get to that. I mean, you must have a lot of images in your archive which you kind of come to
draw on,
in various times of your
I'm not out there with my camera all the time anymore. I mean, like on my phone, yes, but I think I'm now, I spend so much more time, like Yumi told me to, just like mining my archive, because I've got so much. But I do when I'm going places. But now it's if I need to have a relationship to that place, in order for it to inspire me, I suppose.
Yeah. And those works are really interesting. I mean, they also have kind of an abstract feel about them. You're not quite sure exactly what it is that you're seeing. And the sort of striking contrast with that really black background, the pops of color, are just so interesting. And
they are very sculptural, and again, they're very tiny, the things that they're made from. And then I've print them very big, so you have a bodily relationship, because that's particularly with these works, it's how these tiny things are actually impacting on us. But and so having that more confronting relationship to them and wondering what you're looking at, and then reading, like you sort of said, the reading and the writing is really important, and that feeds into my work, but also the curating that I do as well with women in photography. It's not I have to be able to release what's happening below the surface of the images for the viewers to have a lens through which they can view the work, how I intend it, how I, the inspiration for me creating the work, but then what other people make of it. That I'm not sort of going, no, you can only see it the way that I made it. It's I love hearing how other people respond. One of my collectors bought, I can't remember which number it is now, but it's just a singular piece in the middle, and it's sort of floating down. I think it might be Intertwining Stories 1 or 2. And her history is in medicine, and to her it looks like lungs. And because every third breath comes from the ocean, comes from seaweed, that's what we accredit our ability to breathe from. For her, she saw a heart, and she saw all these bodily references which I didn't see at all. So it's always really interesting sort of hearing people say
you do. I mean, like you said, your writing is a big part of your practice, isn't it? I mean, I've read some of your beautiful essays and articles. They're amazing.
It's painful.
Oh, is it?
It's so painful.
I feel like you enjoy it because it's just
I do.
it's so nice to read. It's there's something about it. It feels like it's a real passion for you. And it comes across in the way that you write.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And it is a nice way for me to sort of understand, me personally, to understand your photographs better and what you're thinking through the reading of those writings. And I'm sure other people would feel the same. But I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Some artists don't like to give the audience anything. And others like to explain the ideas behind it, but then you're obviously kind of a bit of both. You like to respond in their own way as well as give them some backstory, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And I think because I'm talking about how I feel about ecology and how I feel about the world around us and how it's changing and how I feel, how I respond to it. And I'm not trying to tell other people what to do, but hoping that the work in some way will create thought or conversation that will maybe sort of open things up for people.
Yeah. And you are concerned with climate change.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Yeah. It's a huge. I don't know how anybody couldn't be really, but I know lots of people sort of maybe don't think about these things quite as much. But I've worked in schools with climate scientists, and when it's something that we all need to be thinking about and making our own. And it's a journey that we're all on, whether we want to be on it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's quite scary, and it's good if you can be kind of educating your audience as well through your work and your writing.
But I want the work to be a bit of a, because it's that thing, intertwined stories. There's nothing romantic about the story that I'm telling. It's because I can't remember the name of the scientist now. I reference a scientist, and the research behind ocean plastics there's nothing romantic about it at all.
No.
But it's my hope is that the art is a hook. It's a way into maybe thinking about some of those things which are quite difficult to think about in a more sort of contemplative kind of way.
Yeah. And sort of a way into conversation. Yeah, definitely. And you are the founder and curator of Women in Photography. So can you tell us how that came about and what that's all about?
Well, that came about as a part of everything that I've been talking about, really, about the art world both been giving and quite closed, and New Zealand is a microcosm of that. It's a small country, it's a small economy, it's everything is smaller, but it's basically punching above its weight, definitely. But also in the teaching that I did, and also it was interesting looking at Growback, because there were definitely more male artists than there were female artists, and all of us have got children, but all of the women haven't quite ended up on the same trajectory as the men. And then I'd had some I was in conversation with a very good agent in London until he realized that I was engaged, and then very unapologetically dumped me because he asked me, are you going to want to have babies? And I was like, yes, not realizing that I was walking into a trap, essentially. I wasn't raised to think that being a woman was any kind of a hindrance. And so it was a real sort of like, what's happening here? I don't understand what's going on. It's like opened my eyes to inequality, and then teaching at art school, seeing all of these amazing female artists, and then just seeing them all evaporate, just going, where's everybody gone to? And sort of thinking, well, I know that I was creating work, even though I wasn't showing it anyway. That there were years when I was just creating for no one else other than myself and some of my collectors, and sort of thinking, well, there must be plenty of other people out there who are doing the same thing, creating this work that has value and is interesting, and this platform is amazing. Instagram's, and I just sort of thought back in 2018, before there was all the sponsored ads and blah 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 and all that kind of stuff, that it was an amazing platform for photography. And I was also looking at other platforms around the world that had started up, and I just sort of thought, I've always been about highlighting the work of others, and I'm not interested in blowing my own trumpet. That's just boring. I was constantly talking to people overseas about what was happening here. So initially I had to set it up, just getting the name, like buying a website name, but not buying a website name, just getting a platform. And so I sort of introduced the platform through that by highlighting the work of, I included myself and 5 other artists from this part of from Aotearoa initially. But I was always very much, I wanted to be hooked into what was going on in Australia as well. And it's just that sort of cross-country collaboration as well. It's our closest neighbour. And it's just kind of grown. It's just grown from there. But I definitely I didn't just want it to be, which is probably counterindicative. Well, it is counterindicative to and intuitive to Instagram, that people had to be able to write about their work. Because I didn't just want it to be an abstract artist statement. I wanted it to be like this, like an artist conversation. Because the artist talks of the things that I really enjoy going to. I occasionally go to openings, but I try to always go to the artist talks, because I'm really fascinated to hear why somebody has made the work that they make and how they've made it.
Yeah, that's why I'm doing the podcast, because I find it just so fascinating as well. And then you just have a whole other appreciation, not to another level of the work once you've heard the artist speak, even if it's not work that you're personally drawn to. I find once you understand, it's just you just have this deep connection to it.
Exactly, and I just sort of I thought, this isn't going to be just something where I just show work that I like. I have to, which is where the writing is so important, in the way that somebody can actually talk about their work, because it gives you an access way into it. So there's work on there that, without the platform, I possibly would have passed by, but through the open calls, but then people saying, oh, have you seen this person's work? Or people just approaching me, or it's been amazing. I mean, it is curated. Not everybody who very much like Jessica was sort of saying in Artful, that I have a vision for women in photography, and it's had some real world iterations. We were in an exhibition in the UK, which was incredible. I've done some real world iterations here in Poneke, and I've got ideas, if I can get the funding. I've got ideas of how it could develop. But really, I wanted community, and it was a bit like that. I mean, it's really cheesy, but Field of Dreams, like if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, that's so true.
And
there's not a lot of things built for artists in that respect. There's not a lot of things out there that people can come to.
And I mean, I haven't got any delusions about. I mean, it is an Instagram account, but opportunities have come for artists from the account. They've been approached to be in exhibitions. They've been approached to be in publications, all sorts. But that really wasn't the impetus for doing it. It was like creating this archive so that it's sort of like these voices matter, whether you see them on a gallery wall or not. These voices matter, they're important, and they're creating amazing work that is insightful, is has a sense of urgency, whether it's quiet or loud, whether they're shouting about what their concerns are, or whether they're doing it, whether they're whispering about them, that it's a community, and I feel really proud of it. I feel it's like I really enjoy it, and it informs my practice all the time. It really does.
That's brilliant. I've got a few questions about that. So it's on Instagram. It's called Women in Photography. That's the
NZAU. Yeah.
Okay, we'll put that link on the bottom of your blog.
Mm-hmm.
And can people, like, do you curate the Instagram page so people send you their work and their writings, and then you put it together? Do you put the writings with the photograph, or how does it work?
No. So there's a whole process. So if people want to run a takeover, then they have to put together a little proposal. I've learned over the years, like a way of being able to, because I work quite closely with the artists, so it depends on how comfortable and confident they are in their writing and abilities. And we've had some sort of people who are doctors, as in PhD, who are very good at writing, but then it's sort of talking to them about make it conversational. So there's lots of toing and froing between myself. People propose either they're going to show a project, they're going to give an overarching view of their practice, maybe they've got a book that's coming out or anything, but they have to be able to talk about why they're making the work that they're making. So the artists actually run the takeovers, and so they have access to the platform. They do all of the posting, but it's all they've spent time reading, writing backwards and forwards between myself and them. And then when it comes to it, then I interact with them throughout the takeover. So the actual main feed has got more of a formal aspect to it, but then the stories become like their scrapbook, where they can show other work that inspires them or fade. It's not supposed to be about necessarily just showing resolved works, because it's all of the stuff that goes on behind in the lead up, which is so fascinating.
Oh, it's so fascinating, and that's a brilliant support, and could be an amazing network for people. Do the people who are part of that collective, I guess you see it as a collective?
I don't see it as a collective in the true sense, because it's not sort of like this is how many members we've got. It's open. It's open to when I say it's funny. I was talking to somebody about this, that it's open to anyone, but it's curated, so which is completely contradictory.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if you have never exhibited. If your work is good and you can talk about it and you can explain it, and you can dive below the surface of the image, then we can have a conversation. And some people, it's like 6 months of conversation before they end up on the platform.
It's a great resource. It's a great resource for the people who are part of it, and it's also a great resource for other artists just wanting to.
And I think just
women in photography from New Zealand and Australia.
Yeah, well, it's female identifying and non-binary, and it's because I just think they're the voices that that we don't hear all the time. But it's interesting. I was interviewed about women in photography, and they said, when you look at all the statistics and everything, do you just think, well, what's the point? And I was like, no. I said, but to be honest, I don't actually spend much time looking at the statistics. I said, because my mum used to sort of say to me that wherever you set your attention, that's what's going to grow. Whatever you nurture, that's what's going to grow. And for me, I'm surrounded by all of these amazing female and non-binary artists who are opening up all of these new conversations and creating all of this work. And so I'm just sort of like, well, this is where the future is. So that's where I'm looking. It doesn't matter if we haven't been, of course it matters that we haven't been represented. But that doesn't mean that the work isn't amazing. So it's just like, okay, what can I do to elevate that? Because if we all write, it's not sort of about me thinking that we need to be above, or I want it very much my relationship with the artist to be sort of, this is your voice. I'm just here to help amplify it and ask questions. And
it's very powerful, a network of artists, I think. Very cool. Now we have been talking for quite a long time.
Okay.
But I feel like we've still got so much we could be talking about. I'd love to talk more about your other works, but people can look on your blog post and your website.
And my website and Instagram.
More, and get onto the Women in Photography. I would just like to know, what would you say to your younger artistic self?
I was thinking about that question last night, actually. And I did write something down. And it was to always just put yourself a little bit outside of your comfort zone. That's where, and somebody shared something recently that David Bowie sort of said about that if you're in your comfort zone, that's not where the magic happens. You need to be pushing yourself. He equated it to water. He said it's like, get to that point where you literally can just feel your toes, the very tip of your toes on the bottom, and where you feel like you could sink. And that's where the magic happens. And I think I would just remind myself of that, because I think I've always kind of done that to a greater or lesser degree. And there were chunks of my life where I had to feel like my feet were firmly on the bottom, because of familial responsibilities and other things going on in my life. But also to not be scared of those deep, dark waters, because that is kind of where all the magic is. And also that my gut, and I have to listen to my to remind myself that gut instincts are really a very important part of what I do, and that when I don't listen to them, that's when things go awry. So
trust the gut.
And push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Be in that. And I do it so much, and I have to remind myself to do that, because I love going swimming in the sea. I'm a real sea swimmer, but I'm not a strong swimmer, so that's a real challenge. So I'm constantly pushing myself outside of my comfort zone, but it's a good place to be.
It's a good analogy too, with life in general, I guess, not just with an art practice. And I feel the same. It's just, that is definitely where the magic happens, when you take on stuff. And also, like you said earlier, doing things, being proactive and taking initiative to create things that you're passionate about,
don't create work for other people. God, don't do that.
No.
Never do that.
No.
And that can be the tricky thing with Instagram and social media, is that you see what everyone else is doing, and it's kind of like, oh, maybe I should be doing that. And sort of like, don't do anything because you think you should be. Do it because you can't not do it.
That's right. Yeah, totally. All right. Well, thank you so much, Virginia. It's been a joy to meet you and see your beautiful work behind you. And I've really, like I said to you earlier, I've really, really enjoyed researching your work and you as a person and reading your writings. And I recommend people listening to go and have a deeper look. And,
thank you.
And thank you very much for joining me today. It's been such a treat.
Oh, it's been really lovely. And if you're ever down in point of view, then please do come by the studio, and also to other people, if they ever want to sort of pop in and say hi, then just flick me a message. It's always nice to meet people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to meet you in person. All right. Well, thank you so much, Virginia. See you soon.
Okay, take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.